Hi everyone. In this episode I'll go through creating a richer model object for the categories listing, because as you can see in the app, the list of categories is a pretty plain vanilla table view, and we want to spruce that up a bit with some thumbnails and so forth. And to do that we'll need some more data for each of the categories, more so than just the title. Because if you see currently in Xcode, the categories list is just a list of NS strings. So let's get started. So firstly, let's make a model class. Let's call this a image category. And the image category will need the following three properties. Name, obviously. It will need the data URL. The data URL will be this URL here. So this is the URL that the app will have to hit to fetch the data for that category. And we'll also need a URL for the thumbnail. So here's an example of a thumbnail that I've chosen. So it would be that URL here. Great. Now for our image category, we'll make a convenience initializer so that in our manager, when we create a list of categories, it's a lot quicker to do so. So that's the definition of our convenience initializer. It's a static, and you'll need to pass it the name, the data, and the thumbnail. When it comes time for using this in the manager, it'll become obvious how much time this saves us. This is all pretty self-explanatory. The only thing worth mentioning is this self-alloc init. Because this is a class method, we have the ability to self-alloc init, which is very handy when you are subclassing things later on. The self-alloc init will make sure that it will make the correct subclass instance. Okay, back to the categories manager. In the header file, it's probably worth putting a comment in to say that these objects are image categories. Of course, if this was Swift, you could make it a typed array, but we're using Objective-C, so we don't really have that feature yet. And now when we create the list of categories, this is the time when it becomes useful that we have the convenience initializer. So instead of these ones, it will be like so. Snow URL. I'll just copy and paste that a few times. Fast forward this. Now I'm not going to bother doing wine because I tested in the Wallhaven website and the wine photos are pretty boring and there's a lot of photos of Amy Winehouse. which I also didn't find particularly interesting. Okay, so here's the snow data URL. Pop that in there. The snow thumbnail. The motorbike data URL. The motorbike thumbnail. Cars URL. Cars thumbnail. And so on and so forth. Now you may be wondering why I'm using the data URLs being the HTTP data URLs, not an API endpoint. And that's a good question, and the reason is that Wallhaven doesn't have an API. And for the purposes of this demo, I didn't really want to use a service that needed an API and API keys, because I find keys are an issue for people when learning and a bit of a sticking point. So we're going to be using screen scraping for better or for worse. Thus these direct URLs. And let's tidy this up. Great. We've now got our categories is an array of actual model objects, not just NS strings, which is what we want. Next, we need to change the view controller to actually use these model objects. So we'll need to import the image category model object header. And here where we're setting the title for the cell, instead we will get the model object. And we will use its name for the title. So when we run this, the app won't look any better, but this gives us a foundation for later on, which we'll use in another future screencast. Thanks for watching.